I have both failed and not failed in a myriad of ways. You know, you could say like my race at the Olympics was a failure, but maybe it isn't. Depends how you spin it. But the thing is, like, once you reach a level where, and you don't have to be athletically speaking, but once you reach a level where you no longer are defined by that fear, you're going to be free to do almost anything, you know, understand that some things take more work. So for me, it was just having my mother by my side, always believing in me and telling me like, you're capable of more than you think, and kind of ingraining that in me, and also seeing her do that, how she was able to reinvent herself. So I would say that for sure for me has been my mother. And now as a parent, you know, without pumping my kid's head too much, I'm like, hey, don't set any limits, not because you're a girl or because you're a boy or because so-and-so said what. Like, let's find out what you're capable of, and we'll support you, whether it's in academics and athletics or whatever. And funny enough, I don't push running on them. They're obviously super aware of it. But if they want to pursue it, I'll support them. If they want to pursue, you know, my girls are big into Taekwondo, I support it. So it's just about like willing to go out and take a stab at doing things, and being okay with whatever the outcome is, as long as you gave it an honest effort.
Welcome back to another episode of the Mile 40 podcast. Thank you all for continuing to tune in. This has been a lot of fun. I am super fortunate to have these incredible guests come on to share their stories and to give you guys hopefully some insight and inspiration. If you haven't already, please be sure to hit subscribe if you're listening on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, wherever you get your podcast from. Also, check out the show notes. There's a discount code for picking up a copy of Break Barriers or Audacious. Today's guest is a guest I am super excited about because about a year ago, he interviewed me, and now I'm here interviewing him. Roberto Mandje. He was a professional runner from 2004 to 2016. During that time, he competed in the 1500 meters at the 2004 Olympics, the IAAF World Cross Country Championships, and the Xterra Trail World Championship, where he placed 7th in 2012 and 5th in 2013. He started coaching both individuals and groups in 2005. In 2016, he joined New York Roadrunners. He's coached runners of all ages as young as middle school, both remotely and in person. He's also coached runners as part of his time at the sponsors camps and running schools, clinics such as Nike, Newton Running, and Power Bar, amongst others. Roberto, thank you for joining me, my friend.
Yeah, thanks for having me. You're right. The tables are turned. So here we go.
Of course. Yeah, you're in the hot seat now. I'm really grateful that you took the time out to join me. You are the first Olympian we've had on. I know we've had some athletes on, but I think you're the first Olympian, which is super exciting. So we're going to talk about your journey and how you got there. But I want to just take us back really quick. So you and I met last year at the New York City Marathon, and I was speaking on a panel, which you interviewed me on, and you were training someone that year. Who were you training that year?
I mean, I was training a bunch of people, but I think maybe the one that might stand out is Casey Neistat.
That's right.
Yeah, a
That's
good friend of mine. He was chasing sub 3, which had been chasing for about 17 years, and at the time, 24 marathons or 23, 24 marathons. So yeah, quite the journey.
Oh, I did not know that. I didn't know it was that long of a journey. I thought it was one of those things where, he set a goal out, a year or two before and had been working with you.
Oh, no. Well, for the show notes, we should add his fantastic video that he made afterwards, because he's a big YouTuber. So he made a really great video of his journey from, year one till present day. And yeah, it's compelling.
100%. We'll definitely add that. And so that actually kind of segues me into a pretty good question to kick things off. When you start working with someone like that, who's had a long journey in running, right? And then sets a goal like that, how much of your coaching is mindset coaching versus, the actual, physical coaching and the training?
Fantastic question. I would say a lot of it, I'm not sure about percentage, a lot of it is mindset, because I like to my approach is to try to treat each athlete I work with as a system, if you will. And I try to learn the system and download as much information as possible. And that's because human physiology doesn't really change from athlete to athlete. Obviously, some people have a higher VO2 max, et cetera, and I won't get too sciencey on it. But the thing is, like, trying to figure out their why, their motivator, what keeps them going, why are they chasing, whether it's sub 3, sub 4, their first marathon, what have you. and then what their strengths are, what their weaknesses are. Because for most people, it's like, well, let's focus on your strength, but ideally, we want to turn your weaknesses into your strengths. So in the case of somebody like Casey, who had been running forever and ever and had tried the marathon, you know, dozens of times and what have you, is like, okay, what has worked, what hasn't worked, where have been the pain points, why have you gone so close at different times but not made it, and kind of study that and then figure out a different plan of attack. So in his case, it was really getting the taper down. So I really worked hard with him on the taper. I worked with him throughout, but like really focusing on the taper and doing less, which is a really hard thing for most people to do, especially when you're highly motivated. And then luckily he had a lot of trust in me. We've been good friends for several years now. It's like, and then on race day, just making sure that he would stick with me and stick to the plan, the plan was, both hydration, nutrition, what we were going to take, when we were going to take it, at which intervals, and how fast we were going to go out, and knowing that it's going to feel easy until it isn't. And ideally it doesn't feel, it's hard in the last 5K versus the last 10K or further. So, but again, everybody's different. And throughout the training cycle that I'm working with them, I start to learn them. I start to get to know them better and better and what makes them tick and how to both psychologically and physiologically, push them and get the best out of them.
Thank you for walking us through that. And, just to kind of level with you here, I've now run 10 marathons. I've run 5 New York City marathons. When I first started running my very first marathon, I had no idea what I was doing. I think I ran it in 4:40 something. And this last London marathon, I got myself down to a 3:28. But and thank you. But the thing about it, and this is something that I think about all the time, is I have been making adjustments over the last 7 years to my training. And I like to consider myself disciplined, and I'm somebody who listens to instruction. And I'm a little OCD and obsessive when it comes to my training. I don't ever want to miss a workout. Um, One of the things that I've noticed more recently over the last year and a half, 2 years, where I've seen my fastest times, was my ability to respect recovery, my ability to listen to my body a little bit more. Um, but I still have trouble sometimes answering the question of, what am I doing now that has led to such a big jump? And I kind of position this not to talk about myself, but as much to ask you, when you come across those individuals that you've been working with who make a jump from, let's call it a 4 and change marathon to, somewhere in the threes, what are some of the things that you're seeing the most that stand out that help them get there?
Sometimes it's as simple as mindset and belief, because you have to ideally see yourself doing it before you've done it. You have to believe that you can. So that's also where a coach who's maybe been there and done that and has a resume of athletes or themselves really helps, because then you have somebody who believes in you, maybe even more than you believe in yourself. The other thing is also sometimes it's just about how you tweak something as simple as the long runs, if you will. So, I could say go out and run 20 miles this Sunday, and you go out and do it at a decent pace, whatever, cool. You got the fitness for it, the benefits, etc. But I could say go out and run a 20 miler where we're going to run the first 5 miles, nice and easy conversational pace, and maybe the next 10 miles there in the middle, pretty hard. And then kind of like, play around with the remaining distance. So it's like in that example, both athletes have run 20 miles, but one of them has run it differently and they're working different energy systems. Therefore, they're going to get a different return from that and boost, if you will, and also confidence, because like, hey, this long run I did 10 miles at faster than marathon pace or gold marathon pace, GMP. You keep doing things like that throughout the training cycle, however long it is, 12 weeks, 6 weeks, etc. So you're getting the physiological benefit training, but then you're also getting that psychological benefit and boost, because you're growing in your belief and your coach believes in you and you're getting that positive reinforcement. So come race day, you're not wondering, can I do this? You're like, I've done this. I've done 90% of the work already in training. So I know I could do it. So, there's a lot of different tweaks that you can make. And again, it comes down to the sort of athlete that you're dealing with and knowing when to push them and when not to, and even sometimes when to play sort of mind games, with them.
I love that. I can see you playing some mind games with some
Oh
people.
yeah. Yeah.
Um, so that leads me to a question. If you think about yourself both as a coach and as a runner individually, What has this sport taught you about the human capability to accomplish hard things, right? And I say this because there was a point in my life where I said to myself, I can never run a marathon. And now I'm thinking, uh, you know, I'll be honest with you. I just ran 3:28, and in the back of my mind, there's still a little bit of doubt of I could never run 3, but there's a part of me that is sure as hell gonna try. So, tell me what you've learned about just that capability of the human body to endure, and what how it's affected you personally.
Yeah, I would say that it really, the first thing is just belief. You have to believe that you could do something sometimes long before you've ever done it. I was actually just having a conversation with a runner the other day and talking to them about how back in the day, if you will, in the 50s or what have you, you had Roger Bannister and a bunch of other really world-class milers chasing the first sub 4 minute mile, where scientists and doctors and scholars were saying like the human body, physiologically speaking, we can't run under 4 minutes. And these people thought they could, and they believed, and they saw themselves doing it. And now fast forward to present day, you have high schoolers doing it, and like we haven't evolved. It's just our, mental approach to that, if you will. But obviously, training practices, nutrition, hydration, the technology and shoes, etc. But again, the belief has to be there. So I would say, to specifically to your question, when working with athletes or even in my prior experience, it really just has to come down to, do you believe that you could do something, and being kind to yourself and allowing grace, because believing obviously isn't just going to get you there. You have to be willing to train hard, but then also have the trust in either yourself or working with a coach. So in my case, I had to learn through the hard way just to really be kind to myself, because going back to high school, I could win races. And if I won a race, but maybe I didn't break a record, I would be upset at myself. Or I would compare myself to somebody else across the country or across the state or what have you. So it's allowing grace and being kind to yourself, and knowing that the best way to, as they say, the best way to eat an entire pizza is one slice at a time. So let's set those intermediate goals, and reward yourself, celebrate those, because along the way you might have to pivot, but you might find that you're capable of more, instead of just trying to make that giant leap and chastising yourself just because you can't go from 4 to 3:10 or 3:30 or what have you, especially when you see other people doing things like that.
Absolutely. It all starts inside, right? It all starts with the mindset. So, let's get back to your story now. When did you start running?
I mean, I think my official started running, I would say, I grew up all over the country, all over the world. I spent some time in the various countries in Africa, specifically in South Africa and Swaziland as well. We had a day that was called like field day in primary school, and they just had everybody run, I don't know, maybe 2 laps around the perimeter of the school. I have no idea. I think the total distance was 2K or 1.25 miles. And anyway, I ran it just, in my regular school uniform, and I finished second in the entire school. And I think I was in year 5, which is like fifth grade here in the US. And the only kid that beat me was a year 7 kid, seventh grader, who was much more developed and a lot taller and bigger. I was a very late bloomer. Anyway, the primary, the headmaster of the school contacted my parents and like, hey, this boy is really good at running. So my parents put me in a road race. I remember I had like these awesome high tech shoes. That was a brand. I don't know if it exists anymore. Showed up to the start line, and I look around me, and the vast majority of the other runners around me were barefoot. And I was like, oh, should I be barefoot? And my parents were like, no, no, of course not. I was like, what do I know? So that really started I guess, my journey in running. But I was doing so many other sports at the time that running was always in the periphery. I always realized that I was either the fastest or amongst the fastest in anything we did, any sports, when they had us run laps for punishment or things like that. So, and then, I essentially eventually moved to the US around high school age. And that's when my running started to gradually take a more serious approach, because, I broke a school record in a mile, in gym class, which was an actual mile because we ran around the track. And yeah, it just kind of took off from there. But like I said, I was a very late bloomer, so I didn't really start to get faster till the second half, of high school, just because I grew about a foot in high school.
Got it. You had mentioned moving around a lot. What were some of your family circumstances? Why were you moving around a lot?
Growing up, my parents, my dad was a diplomat. So, we were 2 years here, 2 years there, Northern Africa, like Egypt, Southern Africa, as I just mentioned, Western Africa, like Equatorial Guinea. So yeah, just kind of jumping around, obviously making some stints back in Europe. I was born in Barcelona, so it was a great way for me to grow up. I was an only child, so I made friends everywhere I went. It exposed me to different cultures, point of views, and languages, and that's something I still hold very dear, and try to replicate that for my kids now as a parent.
It's definitely really evident in talking to you that you're very well cultured. You have a demeanor about you that's very accepting. That shows that you're aware that people coming from different walks of life with different viewpoints, and there's a tolerance level that you definitely present, which is I think incredibly special, especially in a global sport. And in a field where you're meeting people from all kinds of backgrounds. Just so we get a little bit more insight into you personally, did it impact you at all negatively growing up, the fact that you're moving around a lot, even socially? Or was it something that your parents did a good job kind of just making you aware of, like, this is our situation, and they kind of coached you through how to handle it?
Yeah, it's hard to say. I mean, hindsight's obviously 2020. But I would say for me, maybe I'm just wired the way I'm wired in the sense that I actually enjoyed it. Everything was like every move was like a new chapter, a new adventure, and I still live my life that way in the sense of like I live my life like it's a book, and then each phase is a different chapter. So I had my career, my chapter as a professional athlete, and I'm in my chapter as a father and coach and a bunch of other things. So growing up, I just treated it somewhat similarly, obviously compartmentalized slightly different, but it was also an opportunity to learn new languages. And the one thing I will say to kind of maybe tie back to sport is that sport was always the universal language because, we moved to Egypt and I didn't speak, Arabic. But I spoke sport, so like going to the playground, I could kick a ball, I could jump, I could throw, even if, I never heard of certain of the sports. Same thing when we were down in South Africa, like I'd never heard of cricket or rugby or squash, but like I'd heard of racquetball, I'd played tennis, so sports was always the one thing that kind of like lowered the barrier of entry. And then fortunately, I was able to pick up languages pretty quickly as a young kid, and I still practice that a bit. So, but sports is the one thing that's pretty universal anywhere you go in the world, and I love that.
Got it. And just a couple of rapid fire questions here. How many languages can you speak?
I think six or seven. I have to count
Amazing.
them.
Amazing. Outside of running, what was your favorite sport?
Football, aka soccer.
Soccer? What position you play?
Now I'm playing. I wasn't able to play before. I'm a winger. I'm pretty
Okay.
fast and good with my feet. Yeah.
Got it. Got it. Okay, cool. And then you go back to high school. You ran that mile. How fast was that mile in high school?
4:58.
Wow.
Yeah, the
Wow.
first mile that I think I ever ran that was like official or clocked. Yeah.
And you talked about that race where people were running barefoot. Um, do you have any insight that you can share on that? I mean, like, if you read about running and you read about, they talk about, being barefoot is essentially like how, we were meant to run as humans. Do you have any insight, opinions, or just thoughts on that, given that, you're probably one of the only people listening to this podcast who is amongst a bunch of barefoot runners?
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that because obviously you can only see me from here up, but I'm barefoot right now. I've been barefoot all day other than when I went out for a run. So I actually lived most of my life barefoot. There's days where if I don't run, I'm not wearing shoes. I drive my kids to school without shoes on because I'm in the car and yada yada. But yeah, I would say there's two schools of thoughts, and the way you have to look at it is these runners that I was running with in South Africa, like they were born and raised that way. So their feet were already acclimatized. And even though it's a road race, they could handle that. So like had I taken off my shoes there, I would have probably injured myself. That being said, a lot of people, they see like the barefoot running movement, which I was actually like a part of back in I guess the 2010s, if you will, when I was running for Newton Running and they had their shoe and it's all about barefoot running and things like that. But you have to realize that we're also operating, most of us, in an unnatural world, meaning unnatural surfaces like concrete, asphalt, and things like that. So yeah, you can build up to running barefoot on those surfaces, but it's going to take a little bit longer. Whereas if you are born and raised and just running on grass and dirt and things like that, your feet become acclimatized and then it's different and your feet are actually stronger. So, years and years ago, I was in New Zealand for a few months and they have a big barefoot culture there. Like you could literally go to the grocery store barefoot and it's like no worries. And I absolutely love that. So I spent so much time that I was there for about 3 months or so. And then like I was barefoot all the time, and I started even running a little barefoot. Long story short, I got plantar fasciitis, which is like the only injury in my running career that really ever kind of stayed with me. I had it for 7 months, and I think I overdid it. So is it the moral of this story is just take everything with a grain of salt, like ease into it if you actually are interested in being barefoot more. So like I said, I walk around barefoot around my house, in my yard, etc. But when it's time to go run, I will put on running shoes because I'm not interested in running barefoot and stepping on a rock or anything like that. But if you're born and raised that way, then yeah, the bottom of your feet are going to look different than the bottom of most of our feet.
Yeah, yeah. No, thanks for walking us through that and for giving the audience some insight there. Because most people, into especially people that just grew up here, didn't know, and probably haven't picked up some of these books, would have no idea.
Yeah.
And so that's super helpful to kind of dive into.
Well, I think
So now,
the
yeah, go
book,
ahead.
Born to Run,
Born
which
to
came
Run,
out, yeah, I forgot the year now, but with Micah True, I believe that
with
kind of set off it.
Taramura.
And yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, and like again, they were phenomenal runners, super impressive, but like they have like generations and generations of that's all they've done. So you're a quote unquote Westerner, you read that book, you're inspired, you take off your shoes, you go out and run, like now
you're
you
gonna
got
hurt
stress
yourself.
fracture. So
Yeah,
again, context, but yeah, like I was running during that movement. I saw like a lot of the major footwear brands go into the minimalist thing. I remember New Balance did that as well. Like I said, Newton running. But then fast forward now, it's like the carbon plate shoes, which I saw the latest Nike Vaporflies. I'm not even sure what they're called. And holy cow, it looks like a shoe on top of a coffee table. Like
I
there's
run
just
with
so
the
much
Alpha
to it.
Flies. I do my
Yeah, that's
marathons
it.
in the Alpha Flies. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's
So
like, that's the opposite of barefoot.
yeah, I don't know if you have. I mean, I don't know if you're allowed to share, but what do you run in when you run your races?
Honestly, I run in virtually anything, whatever brands send to me. So, if you're listening out there, shoe brands, yeah, I just, the UPS delivery man just came and dropped off a box of shoes. I haven't even opened them, but yeah, I tend to run in whatever. When I'm doing a pacing gig for New York Roadrunners and I'll wear New Balance shoes and I'm very comfortable in those, but my feet are pretty neutral and I could run in anything. And I'm usually not pacing any sort of pace that requires me to be in a very specialized shoe, like, a regular neutral trainer, and I'm good to go.
Got it. Got it. So now take us back. High school. High school is where now you're here in the States. Running is starting to get a little bit more competitive. Were you aware of it at all, or did you have your sights set on a specific um, accomplishment when it came to running? Like, were you in high school knowing that you were an elite runner? You could probably compete at the highest level. Was something like the Olympics even, in your vision at that point, or what were you striving for, at that age?
Yeah, I would say definitely not. I was not an athlete of specificity, meaning one of those athletes that from a young age they're in these camps and everything. If anything, I actually had goals and dreams of make it to the NBA. I
Love
wanted to
that.
be yeah, I wanted to be like Mike. I mean, what kid growing up in the 90s didn't want to be, whether you're in Europe, Africa, or obviously here in the US. And I set a goal. I was like, I'm going to be 6'4", maybe 6'6", but most likely 6'4", and I'm going to make it to the NBA. And I had a life size cutout of Michael Jordan in my room. And then I was like, all right, maybe I'll settle for 6'4". All right, maybe I'll settle for 6'2". I just kept coming back down by inches and, landed right around 6 foot. And, I did not make the NBA. Spoiler alert. But that's all to say, like, I played a lot of different sports. I played ice hockey. I snowboarded a lot, et cetera, et cetera. So through high school, as I mentioned before, I was a relatively late bloomer. I entered high school around 5 feet, 4'11", 5 feet. So running was awesome because I could run fast and it didn't matter my height. I didn't make it to varsity in basketball, so I was fairly good, but it was pretty obvious, like, okay, this kid isn't going to be 6'6". So right around my junior year, when I started to grow a little bit, is when I started to take running a little bit more serious, meaning that was the first year that I did cross country in the fall, winter track in the winter, of course, and then spring track. So prior to that, I would do cross country, which I love. In the winter, I do basketball, snowboarding, and ice hockey. Not at the high school level, just like pond hockey and things like that. And then spring, I would return very out of running shape and just get away with it. But by my junior, senior year, I'd attended a few running camps. I left the basketball camps behind, and I was like, okay, like, I've been in the top 50 in the Northeast, let's say, of runners, and with minimal training, let me see what I could do if I focus more on it. And that's when I start to kind of see a both metaphorical and literal growth spurt in my running.
Did you have any thoughts about the commitment that you'd have to make to go down this route? Like, when I think about a lot of the college athletes that I know, a lot of them, ended up getting just worn down after year one, year two, and then a lot of people came out of college hating the NCAA. This was pre NIL
Yeah.
and everything like that. Um, did that ever cross your mind? Because it seems to me like you were an athlete who just loved sports, more so than an athlete who was out there um, for other reasons. So, what was running through your head about the potential commitments that you were going to have to be making if you were to take one of these sports that seriously?
Yeah, I think with me it was, and I'm still on that journey, just on the opposite side now, is that I always fancy myself an athlete. I love testing my body and movement and just seeing what I was capable of, and I'm really enjoying that journey of life right now in that space. But at that point, it was like, this is almost pre-internet era, kind of to date myself. I'm 42 years old. So like you didn't have social media per se, but you would go to the races and the other schools and other coaches would start to take more notice of you. And little by little, colleges would send physical letters to either your home, or in my case, it was mostly to my cross country and track coaches. So I'd be sitting in class and some of my coaches happened to be my biology teacher or my English teacher, and they would just give you a shoebox of letters. So I started to get that sort of recognition, and I was like, okay, like if I put in a little bit more work, I could go a little bit faster because I know how fast I've gone with like not training in the summers. Every summer in high school, I'd go back home to Barcelona and hang out on the beach with my cousins. And then I'd come back and like get fitter throughout the season. So it was the sort of thing where I was like, okay, let me just focus more on this sport. And I started to snowboard less in the winter. I started to, everything took a back seat, if you will. But my approach was always like, let's just find out what we could do. And I know that I only have a window in my life to be at this physical peak, if you will. And that's kind of how I took it going into college. So I didn't really I didn't really get burnt out. And then going into the professional side, after college, it was a similar thing. Like, let's just keep going, keep going. The only difference is that the stakes were higher because you're signing contracts. You have, 4-year cycles between Olympics and things like that. But my mentality was always the same. It's like, let's just see how much better I could get. And when I stop having fun, I'll step away from this and do other things.
I love that. What were you like socially, in the high school, college years?
I would say it's such a funny question. I was definitely, I would say I was well liked. One thing I really pride myself in, you somewhat touched upon, is that I always felt comfortable moving, through different social groups. Like you had the jocks and I could, identify with them because I was one of the best athletes in the school. I think I won senior year best athlete of the school, like literally. And I got decent grades. I got good grades, but I wasn't throwing anybody to be valedictorian, but I was in a few AP classes, advanced placement or honor classes as well. But I wasn't like the top of the class. So like I had enough credibility in the sporting side and the jock side. And then, coming from a mixed background, speaking languages, also my appearance. So like I was just black enough for the black kids and just white enough for the white kids. I know it's not a very PC thing, but like growing up in the 90s, that's how I was. I was just coming in and out, and they're like, hey, this kid is over here from Europe. He has an accent, or is he here from Africa? And like, what are you, multicultural? And I was always comfortable in my skin. So, and, I'm still that way, obviously more as an adult now. And, humor it was a great, diffuser of awkward situations or awkward questions. But yeah, I just kept evolving, and it was similar in college, except for college it was a little bit more specified because there was less cliques, if you will. High school is that 4-year cycle of like, a lot of these people I've known each other since elementary school, and I'm somewhat parachuting in, and I don't have as much background as them in the area. But yeah, I had a great high school time. I also approached it knowing like, unlike the stereotypical movies, this isn't going to be the best 4 years of my life. It was just like I said, a quick chapter in the book of my life. And yeah, enjoyed it, have no bad memories, and still keep in touch with a lot of the kids I went to school with.
Hey all, it's me, Bishoy. As a marathon runner and endurance athlete, I've come to understand the importance of properly fueling your body for preparation and recovery. Every day, you get a shot at success. How you start your day typically paints a picture of what the rest of the day will look like. Start your day with a super convenient, healthy, and delicious nutritional win. Meal 1 by Creatures of Habit. Overnight oatmeal packed with 30 grams of plant-based protein, chia, flax, and pumpkin seeds. Vitamin D3, omega-3s, a probiotic, and digestive enzymes made in under 1 minute. Stop wasting time or worrying about what to eat as your first meal of the day. Start with meal 1. Visit creaturesofhabit.com, creatures spelled with a K, and use code MILE40 for 15% off a one-time purchase or the first subscription order payment. I love that. I mean, I asked just because exactly like you mentioned, like I feel like you could have fit in so many different, segments or clicks, if you will, during that period. But I also feel like you were really grounded and confident in a positive way. And you were a man of different kinds of people. And so you were able to kind of mold, depending on where you were and the circumstances, whether it was on the field, the track, or just in the social setting. And another reason why I ask is because I think about all the distractions you could have faced at that time, being pulled in different directions. And anyone who gets to the level that you got to has to know how to kind of stay laser focused on their track, and not necessarily sidestep with whatever distractions may be pulled. And because of the fact that you fit so well with so many different people, I think that afforded you room for many more distractions than just the person who just identifies with one or two groups. And so now what I want to do is I want to give the audience some insight into your path to the Olympics. Walk us through the next couple of years, how it happened, and at what point you started to realize, you were going to be amongst the most elite in the world.
Yeah, so like I said, I just gradually got faster in high school. My senior year, I made it to states in several different events, made it to nationals. Excuse me, I think I might have finished 12th in the nation in the steeplechase or something. And I had already kind of locked up a scholarship and everything. So it just kept going. So as I was getting closer to that high school level elite and then like, on the college side as well and scholarship at the Division 1 level, my mother's native country of Equatorial Guinea, where I spent some time as a younger child, and I still have a lot of family there and try to get back there often. They started to take an interest as well. And like, hey, we have like a national here, who, we'd love to have him represent us at the Olympics if he's interested. And apparently they had been interested, I think 4 years prior for the Sydney Olympics when I was 17, 18, but I was not ready. I didn't feel like I was ready. And I was just starting to come into my running, a little bit. So yeah, so it was just a perfect storm that by my senior year, I'd really developed and started to find my footing, if you will. And cause I still grew a little bit in college. So I had like a moment there where I was kind of plateauing. And yeah, the opportunity came, spoke to my mother, my family, and decided like, yeah, I want to do this, meaning go to the Olympics and take my stab at running professionally, because I knew that physically I only had a window for so many years, where one thing that a lot of people don't know is that I actually had a great opportunity to work for National Geographic because I was a photojournalist minor. I traveled around Armenia, Azerbaijan during college and taken some great photos and submitted to a contest. And so I really wanted to be like either a wartime correspondent or Peace Corps, or just be out and feel the real world and tell stories and with the camera and all that. And I got offered like an opportunity through National Geographic my senior year, and it was like either this or this. And I was like, all right, that will always be there, whether I could get it again or not, but it's not dependent on my physicality. We're running the Olympics, etc. It's every 4 years. I'm not gonna be this fast or this young forever. So anyway, obviously, spoiler alert, I went that route, and yeah, it was great. I had a great experience at the Olympics, but I think it's also something that I was able to appreciate more in hindsight years later, because as I think I said before, like I was definitely somebody who was very hard on themselves, and the Olympics for me didn't go as well as, I had hoped they had gone. And I had a great chat with the world record holder and would-be two-time Olympic champion Hikam El Garouche about it, because he was a world record holder and he was supposed to win the Olympics in 96 and then in 2000. And each of those Olympics, one of them, I believe he fell, and the other one, he got nipped at the line. And it was like, okay, outside of the Olympics, you're winning worlds, you're setting world records in various events. Like you are the top dog. But then when it comes to the Olympics, you're snake bitten, if you will. And fortunately, he was able to realize his dream and win the 5,000 and the 1,500 in Athens. And I was actually there for the 1500. We're in the same heat. So we chatted a little bit afterwards because in our heat that he was in, a few runners went down. I stepped on the rail, and yeah, just kind of ruined my race. And I was like, this is awful on the world stage. But again, years later, I was able to appreciate the experience, the once in a lifetime opportunity, and grow from that. But it was the sort of thing that, again, I knew I only had a window to do this and explore, and that kind of propelled me for the next several years of my running career to go on this um, journey of self exploration and just find out how much more I could get out of this sport and how much more can I enjoy it and how many different ways I enjoy it. And that's how I was able to transition from the 1500 meters on the track all the way to towards the end of my career. I was running trail races because it was just a different way to experience running and challenge myself.
That's incredible. Listening to you speak, it reminded me. I met Ashton Eaton a couple of years ago, the decathlete,
Yeah,
and
legend.
legend. And I had the really good fortune of meeting him, and it was at a time before. It was actually the week before I ran my first marathon, and I got to chat with him. And I, I, I had no knowledge of, not enough knowledge, I should say, of the sport at the time, and I had asked him what it was like, you know, seeing himself in the arena with the thousands of people on the world stage, knowing the whole world is watching him, and what was going through his head at that time. And he talked about the fact that, a lot of time people don't realize, those athletes go through years and years of training, of devoting their lives to the sport. And all it takes is one injury. All it takes is, one wrong turn, one incident, even mentally, to throw them off. And you can't help but be grateful in that moment when you're there, but you can't also help but ask, like, why me? Why not someone else? Like, in this stage, or on this stage, excuse me. What was going through your head? Like, when you were there the first time, looking around, like, there's no higher stage in the sport at that point. Did that cross your mind, or were you just, so focused on the task ahead of you, that, perhaps that didn't cross your mind?
Yeah, I would say it was twofold. So I was hyper focused. I just referenced it earlier today to a colleague while running that I just done some of my best workouts I've ever done. I was super fit. I thought, okay, it's the Olympics. We're going to run fast. I done a workout in the Olympic Village with my coach at the time, 4 times 800 meters in about 156, per 800 with a lap recovery. And I remember seeing Bernard Lagat, who I knew he was going to be in one of the heats. And I was like, I'm ready. And then going to the race, it turns out it's like completely the opposite. It was super, tactical. We were walking by our standards and I was like, oh my God, like I didn't prepare for this. I thought we were going to just go fast. So, I had to adjust and so did a bunch of other runners and we're all kind of standing around looking at the King Hamel Garouche and yada, 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 like the fall. But I would say even before that, lining up, there's nothing that could prepare me as a 21, 22-year old, coming from the NCAA Division One level, where it's big, it's high, it's the highest in the U.S. But like each other, like you're all similar. There's every now and then somebody like heads and shoulders above, but like this is like the creme de la creme. I have everybody here, and like the stadium is packed. As the Olympics are coming home, as I said, in Athens, and you have the camera crews right in front of you as they're doing the introduction. So it's a lot of things that could rattle you. And for me, I felt incredibly nervous. I haven't seen the footage in maybe 20 years, but I definitely was crying internally. I was shaking. It was the sort of thing of like adrenaline coupled with like anxiety, coupled with fear, but also with like eagerness to get going. And it's like, I just, so I wasn't maybe set up to run my best race, but is the sort of thing that after that, again, going back to the hindsight thing, coming from that high level, high stage, I was like, okay, if I could survive that, I could survive anything. Like I'll never be this nervous again because you'll never have that first experience again. And I can learn from that. And that's something that, kind of bringing it back to my coaching, running is running. If you're trying to run 4 hours and your first New York City marathon, it's a big stage. It's the largest marathon in the world. It's very scary. and you're preparing, you're just as nervous as I could be at the Olympics. And so it doesn't devalue that, but like the experience I bring from having been there and done that, it's like, hey, these are the sort of ways, the mental tricks you could apply to get the best out of yourself, and like maybe how do you shut out the world, and again, be kind to yourself and don't put as much pressure as again I did, and others tend to. So yeah, it's the sort of thing that I learned from it. But in the moment, I'm 22. I just graduated University a few months ago, and here I am at the top of the world, and I have 3 4 minutes to show what I got.
Yeah. Where did you go to school? College?
I went to University of Albany. I transferred in there my sophomore year. My freshman year, I went to George Mason University in Fairfax,
Got
Virginia. Yeah.
Got it. Got it. When you think about your career overall, and that could even count up until today, right? In the coaching sphere, is there a specific athlete or coach that you've encountered that's either played a significant role in your journey or just has had a moment where they left you, inspired, thinking, and gave you something to kind of reflect on throughout the rest of your career? Is there a specific person that you can speak to?
Yeah, I mean, I've been fortunate enough to work with some truly world class coaches, and some of them have been world class runners. I like to say, and it's a little bit of a cop out, but like I'm genuinely inspired by everybody I come across and I work with, because everybody has their own personal journey, and you don't know that journey intimately until you work with them for those 12 weeks, 16 weeks, whatever. And then for me to be able to take them from mile zero of their journey to the start line, and then at times have the luxury or be able, fortunate enough to pace them, it's almost like completes the story arc. So I'm inspired by all of those. But if I have to pick a specific coach, I would say my former coach, Lorraine Mahler. She's from New Zealand. She won the bronze medal in the 92 Olympic marathon. She also won Boston, and she ran late into her career, but she was also a pioneer right up there with like the Joni Benoit Samuelsons. And yeah, she's become like family. She coached me for several years out in Boulder, Colorado, where she resides. And, funny enough, I didn't know at the time, but I actually watched her in the 92 Olympics in Barcelona where she won bronze. I was 10 years old and she was in her mid 30s, I think. And she ran by and I watched the whole race, but I didn't know it was her. So it was a real serendipitous moment years later to meet her and become so close and have her coach me and then really connect the dots. So, but yeah, it's really hard to pick one person. I really just enjoy being able to give back to the sport that has given me so much, and hopefully inspire people as much as I'm inspired by them.
Absolutely. I mean, you surely do. I could speak firsthand to that. Um, so now it's been what, about 8 years since you left the sport as an athlete, right?
Yeah.
So talk us through how your career wound down and the decision into retiring essentially, and how you make that decision when you think about your childhood and how much of your childhood was centered around being an athlete, and then your adult life, the focal point was the fact that you were an athlete, and um, I'm sure going into fatherhood, I know I think about this a lot. And I know you're active, so this is not because you're not active. But I think a lot about the fact that I want my children to see me to as close to my prime as possible. Like, I know they're not going to see me. They're probably not going to see me like at my absolute prime just because the way that age works. But, you know, I want them to know that like they can do and accomplish anything that they set their minds to. And I imagine that you think similarly, just given, who you are. So walk us through the decision to retire essentially and what was going through your head at that point.
Yeah, I mean, I would say I always wanted to be a father. Long before I even met my wife, I was like, this is something that someday when I meet my future partner, hopefully we align on that. So it was a very big moment for me when I became a father in 2015. My wife and I were living in Germany, so it's a different culture, a different language that I was fortunate to pick up. I didn't have a choice. And so, I enjoyed my time running there. But after being in Boulder, Colorado for 10 years, where it was basically my home base, I did travel around and do camps elsewhere. But that was just like the mecca of running. I really enjoyed running in the mountains, going there and losing myself, and had loads of training mates when I needed them. And it was somewhat the opposite, where we lived in northern Germany, we were actually closer to Sweden than we were to Berlin. It was gray. It was super flat. The summer was fine because the days were super long, but winter really cracked me. So I found myself not enjoying it that much. I had to travel a lot more to find quality races. And then again, I became a father. So my focal point was a little bit different, but I was happy about that. And I would say one of the last runs where I was really close to calling it quits, my daughter, who was maybe one at the time, in 2016, she brought me my shoes. I was heading out for a run, a long run. I actually did a marathon. That's a long run. And she brought me my shoes. I put them on. I said thank you, or maybe Danka, literally. And then she started to try to put on her shoes so she could come with me. She didn't understand, and I had to like explain to her. And with my wife's help, like Papa's going for a run, yada yada. And she just cries. She just like reaching for you. And I remember just running away. I'm like, what am I doing? I'm not enjoying this. I am fit, but like. And that really cracked me. I thought about that for that entire run. And then I ran two marathons. I think, yeah, two marathons as a professional, Valencia in 2015 and Rotterdam in 2016. And despite being fit and being new to that event, neither of them went well. I DNF Valencia because I was like, I'm not going to beat myself up. I'm off the pace. And then I was like, I'm not going to DNF in Rotterdam. I'm going to run. And even if I finish in 220 or 230, which were good times, but not what I was chasing. I'm gonna finish, and I ran myself, I turned myself inside out, ended up in the medic. I DNF, I just massive cramping, etc. And while that was happening, I hadn't missed my daughter's first test, but she was now starting to take regular steps, and she was down in Munich for the week with my wife and my cousin. And I was like, okay, like again, I'm not happy. I'm in the Netherlands, and my wife and kid are in Munich. Blah blah blah. So anyway, I started to think like I'm not enjoying this, and I'm not one to do things or fake my way through things. Like okay, if I'm no longer enjoying it, and it's not just like a momentary funk, like it's time to quit. And so physically, I still felt fine. I was 32, trying to do the math. Oh, 34. Yeah, 34 in 2016 at the time. And I was like, yeah, I could keep going a few more years, but like, I'm not enjoying it. So it's time to, follow my heart and stay still in the sport. I'm not sure what that's going to look like and transition to the next phase in life. And it was something that I always knew was going to happen someday. I never had a date in mind. So yeah, and I knew that sport is going to be a part of my life. I was going to stay active, and much like you just said, like I want to be an inspiration to my kids. And it's funny because like until literally last Friday, I hadn't won a race since they've been alive, I think. And I ran a trail race in New York and New Jersey, and I didn't expect to win, and I won. And my kids were like, "Oh my God, like Papa," because like, I run the New
Still
York
got
City
it.
Marathon. Yeah, well, I run the New York City Marathon. I run, Brooklyn, like I run all the NYR races for work slash fun, and we all get a medal, which is fantastic. But they were like, "Hey, did you win because you got a medal?" I'm like, "No, we all get a medal." And they're like, "Oh, so but yeah, so present day, I consider myself more of a hybrid athlete. It's a term I picked up somewhere on social media where like I play a lot of football, aka soccer. I do a lot of weight training, just calisthenics and things like that, just trying to see what my body's capable of. But while I do that, I realize that my kids are aware of what I'm doing when I go for a run, mountain bike, etc. Same with my wife, and like we are serving as a example for them. And yeah, they will not have ever lived in the time when I was running at the highest level, but that's okay because they'll be able to reference that in later years. But they will know like yeah, growing up, we went on hikes, we went mountain biking, swimming, etc. And that's almost more important for me than leaving them at home and traveling the world and trying to, race against time.
I'm going to ask you a difficult question, and
Okay.
maybe for you it's an easy question.
Okay.
I love my daughter more than anything in the world. But I also realize what sport has done for me, in particular running over the last, 7, 8 years. And I do realize the demands of training, especially, for the goals that I've set for myself. I'm on my sixth world major now, and I'm, looking to do some things that at one point in my life I never thought I was even going to do. But at the same time, I realize that there's 24 hours in a day, 7 days in a week, 365 days in a year. And I really need to make sure that if I want to be the best version of myself on all these fronts, there's got to be sacrifices somewhere. And so while obviously we've had different journeys, and I'm not at a point yet where I'm ready to hang it up, the idea does cross my mind about the fact that when I do stop running at some point, there's going to be a part of me that I've lost. Now, it seemed the way that you told the story where you were able to compartmentalize everything. You knew what you wanted. You knew you wanted to go into that next chapter. You had a vision for it, and it was on this side of the brain, and running was on this side of the brain. But was there a part of you that post 2016 felt like you lost something?
I would say no. It was more like it was an opportunity to grow and develop in a different way, take on different challenges, if you will. So, like I said, I feel like I might have felt that way perhaps if I abruptly stopped because of an injury or something semi dramatic like that. But it was me just coming to terms like, okay, I'm not in the same space anymore mentally. Like I'm not enjoying this, but I love the sport so much. And it's a selfish endeavor at that level. It's all about me, and my wife, took on a lot of sacrifices, etc. So it was the sort of thing where it's like, now let me turn the tables and see how much I could give back to the sport, via coaching, via public speaking, etc., a myriad of ways. And like, I didn't have it completely mapped out, but I knew I wanted to be involved in the sport in the service of others. And that's something I still hold very dear. And I knew I had like years and years of experience behind me. So it wasn't anything terribly dramatic. It was more like, okay, let's, let's enter this new chapter, and you don't have to completely kill off the previous one, but you say, hey, thank you for this journey that we've been on. It's time for this other journey. And it's exciting. It's kind of going back in the day when I was traveling. I was like, okay, 2 years in this country, really enjoying it. Could probably live here for the rest of my life, but my parents are moving us to the next country. So it's like, thank you for your time, Mali, or thank you for your time, Equatorial Guinea, or whatever. Time for the next adventure. And it was always me. And I was fairly grounded. So in this case, it was the same thing. And it's been exciting because I still feel like I'm far from a finished product. I'm still on my journey of self-discovery, and how I interact with the sport continues to change. And I try to just innovate for the sake of my own evolution, but also just to find different ways to reach more people. An opportunity like this podcast is fantastic. Something I wouldn't have dreamt of back in 2016. But yeah, so I'm just on this journey and I'm really enjoying it. And obviously the periphery of it is sport in general, but specifically with running. And I just have enjoyed it so much, and I continue to look forward to enjoying it. And in the process, inspire my kids, as well.
Thank you. That I mean, I have to dig into this just one more time. So the one thing that really stands out about you that we keep repeating, and it's a theme that I think a lot of listeners are going to take away from this, is your ability to break down these chapters and to do it in a way that is really methodical and intentional and genuine. And I need to know, like, I understand your situation as a child moving around a lot. Was it either your mother or your father or a teacher or someone in your life who helped you think about things this way? Because I think that's one of the true differentiators of who you are as a person, right? Because I think a lot of people, myself included, have difficulty breaking things down into chapters like that. Even though I've literally written a book, but it wasn't easy. Yeah, there it is. And one of the exercises my editor gave me when I was writing that book was, he said, I want you to give me the 40 most important moments of your life, and I want you to write 1,000 words for each of those moments. And that was one of the hardest exercise that I ever had to do.
I'll say.
Um, and ultimately, that's how we broke down, the chapters within the book. But in real life, it's really hard to accept when you're moving on from one chapter to another, even when you're going from, you know, whatever it is from, and this, my wife's going to kill me because the example I was going to use was horrible. I was going to say from going to being single to dating to married to father. It's probably not a good example. So that example I'm going to throw away. But but they are different stages of life, and sometimes you don't know and you don't see them coming. And when they happen fast, and they require a lot of adapting. So while not necessarily difficult in a negative way, before you know it, Roberto, you're a dad. Like at one point you were an Olympian and now you're a dad. And there was a lot of things that happened in between that. And you do a really good job of breaking it down and saying, ready to go from the Olympian stage to, just being a runner athlete to then, meeting my wife to then, settling down and now being a family man who uses running on a different platform. So, long-winded way of just asking, was there a parental figure or a teacher or anyone in your life who helped you kind of garner that mindset?
Yeah, I mean, a lot to unpack there. I would say, first and foremost, my mother, she's, you know, literally the strongest person I know. When she came over to the US as a single parent, in high school, she was making, it's a story I've said it several times, maybe just with friends, like she was working and making $16,000 a year, with a teenage son. And I'm not sure how she pulled it up, but she did. She got, continued her education, et cetera, et cetera. But, she's always been my biggest backer, my biggest fan. And she always has said, like, life is too short. Like, go for it. I'll support you. And just knowing you have that solid rock there behind you makes you feel like you could do anything. And also take a chance. Like, if you quote unquote fail, you could always return, reset, and then try another thing. And I think for far too many people, and again, not to get overly philosophical, but I feel too many people don't reach their true potential because we're afraid of failure and
Agreed.
how that defines us. And for me, I have both failed and not failed in a myriad of ways. You could say like my race at the Olympics was a failure, but maybe it isn't. Depends how you spin it. But the thing is, like, once you reach a level where, and you don't have to be athletically speaking, but once you reach a level where you no longer are defined by that fear, you're going to be free to do almost anything, understand that some things take more work. So for me, it was just having my mother by my side, always believing in me and telling me like, you're capable of more than you think, and kind of ingraining that in me, and also seeing her do that, how she was able to reinvent herself. So, I would say that for sure for me has been my mother. And now as a parent, without pumping my kid's head too much, I'm like, hey, don't set any limits, not because you're a girl or because you're a boy or because so and so said what. Like, let's find out what you're capable of, and we'll support you, whether it's in academics and athletics or whatever. And funny enough, I don't push running on them. They're obviously super aware of it. But if they want to pursue it, I'll support them. If they want to pursue, my girls are big into taekwondo. I support it. So it's just about like willing to go out and take a stab at doing things, and being okay with whatever the outcome is, as long as you gave it an honest effort. And I'm trying to remember what the other thing you said was. Forgetting now, but like,
No, that was the answer to the question. Your mother. I wanted to know
yeah,
who was driving that. And so, and I actually think in answering that, you answered what was going to be my last question, but I'm going to ask it anyway in case you have anything else you want to add. But what has the sport taught you the most about yourself?
I would say resiliency. Like, I've said this before, but fall down 9, get up 10. It doesn't matter how many times you fall down. Just get up. And, it, again, cliche, but it takes, whatever, 10,000 steps or 10 years to become an overnight success. And people usually just see the finished product, but you're a work in progress. So the sport has just taught me that sort of patience, that sort of ability to believe in yourself, and work hard and set goals along the way. And I take that into my non-running life, but as well as coaching as well, because there's so many parallels with sport and life. And I think with me, not that I have one set philosophy, but I think it's just believe in yourself. Like, you're capable of much more. And as far as I know, not to be overly religious, like, I only have one go at it here, and I want to try to live as many lives as possible while being responsible, because I'm an adult and I have kids, etc. So it's like, sport has taught me like the opportunity to believe in yourself, be resilient, and believe it. And I just said believe in yourself, but be resilient, believe in yourself, and be willing to go for it. Because if you go for it and you fall short for whatever reason, at least you'll know. And my thing is, I don't want to get down the road to my 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, whatever, and have regrets. So with sport, I retired when I retired, knowing that I still had probably some PBs in me, personal best, but I was happy with where I was and content. And even now, 8 years later, there's not ever a moment where I'm like, God, I wish I hadn't, cause like I'm around my kids more. I've inspired and single-handedly worked with more runners now than I would have been able to had I been focused on myself. And that is just so rewarding to me. And it's a different way to experience the sport. And I'm just really enjoying that journey that I'm on and hope to continue it for many, many years to come as I continue to innovate.
Absolutely. We hope you continue as well. And, what you're doing right now, it shines bright, and you're impacting many people. And so I want to thank you for what it is that you're doing on a daily basis. And in particular, I want to thank you for joining me today. It was a real sincere pleasure to have you on the show. We probably should have done this sooner, so I'm glad that we got to it. And I just want to say thank you. Thank you for coming on, for inspiring, for teaching, and for giving us insight into how your journey not only truly impacted you, but has set an example for your family and for those who you work with closely now. So thanks for that.
Oh, you're too kind. Thanks for having me. And hope a lot of this resonates with the listeners.
You got it, brother.